Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Claim drafting best practices. Let's look at some of the best practices that you need to follow while drafting the claim. Aim for the broad coverage. Now, this is something which you will do because once you have an invention, you will have to look at all the embodiments that the invention is capable of, and your description should encompass all the embodiments. You will ensure that you can only claim an invention, or the scope of the claim can only be as far as the prior art will permit it to be. So you should avoid the prior art and at the same time have a claim as broad as what the prior art will allow you to have. Understand that if you don't claim something, then that is regarded as disclaimed. You have given up a claim over it. So what is not claimed is disclaimed. And there are cases decided by the courts which essentially tell you that if you have left out something or if you have not claimed something, then it's as you don't have a right over it. Now, try to direct the claim towards multiple classes or categories. Like you could have an apparatus claim, you could have a method claim, and you can have different types of method claims as well. Now, a claim for an article, you can have an article claim, what is called an apparatus claim. You could have a process of manufacturing the article, that could be a method claim. You can have a process claim or a method claim for use of the article. Now, include claims of varying scope. This is one thing which normally people would do, because once you have an independent claim which is really broad, then you can have dependent claims of varying scope, because most of the time you would not know what would be the objections that will come either from the patent office or by a competitor who wants to challenge your patent. So having claims of varying scope allows you to give up some claims if there is an objection saying that the claim is overtly broad, and at the same time salvage something if you have a narrow claim which can be enforced in an infringement suit. So you could have claims with varying scope, and this could be done using dependent claims. Now, claims should not be broad to cover non-enabled matter. Now, enablement or enabling disclosure, as they call it, which is something which you will see in the future lectures, which will cover how to write a specification, the specification part. Now we are concentrating on the claims. Now you have to enable a person skilled in the art to do the invention or to come up with the invention. So what you have not enabled, you will not be able to claim, because that could be an objection on your claim. So you can only claim the things which you have enabled. So you have to ensure that the claims are not too broad to claim things that you have not enabled in your specification. Now, there could be a subject matter objection or a subject matter which could be a ground for invalidation. Now, we know that certain subject matters cannot be patented under the Indian Patents Act. For instance, inventions pertaining to atomic energy, if they come under Section 20 of the Atomic Energy Act, then you cannot have a patent over it. So always be careful about, while trying to claim a broad coverage for your claim, be cautious about the subject matter. Now, in preparing the broadest claim, you would claim the essential elements, the elements that have to be in your independent claim. You would use dictionary and the thesaurus to expand the meaning of the elements, to get words to expand the scope of the elements. You should include sub-elements of the invention as well. We had seen that there could be an element and the element could have sub-elements. So you can introduce the sub-elements in detail in the dependent claims. Now, complex machines normally have multiple claims covering the sub-elements. So you should, whenever you are patenting a complex machine, you should factor that there could be multiple claims directed towards the patentable sub-elements and substances. Avoid unnecessary limitations and elements. Now, the limitations can come in the preamble, it can come in the transition or in the body. So you need to ensure that, because having a limitation in the preamble, and this is a point we have covered earlier, having a limitation in the preamble could mean that the claim will be read in a restrictive manner. A narrow interpretation would be given to that claim. Now, define the novel and non-obvious elements. You can do this by comparing it with the prior art, and you can ensure that what your invention is not obvious to a person skilled in the art. Define the elements by their invention, because the elements will define the invention. If it's an apparatus claim, you're going to define the elements, the parts in it, and if it's a process claim, you're going to define the steps. You could have means clauses by which you could have a broader claim, a means for heating rather than identifying a particular heating element, or a means for holding rather than identifying a holding element. Now, use functional language. We have already covered this aspect. To describe a function of result that necessarily flows from the element described. Now, whenever you describe element, you describe the function which flows from that element as well. Now you could broaden this by saying these are words which have been allowed in some jurisdictions, having sufficient flexibility. Now, what that flexibility is, you can describe it later, but having sufficient flexibility or an effective amount of X. Now, these gives you a broader scope, because the effective amount, you necessarily have to explain what that amount is in the specification or in a dependent claim, but this allows you to have a broader scope. Now, compare broadest claim with the prior art, because prior art you have to ensure that there are no prior art objections at the time of prosecution, and also when the patent, if you want to enforce your patent, if your invention reads into the prior art, then it is a possible objection a competitor can raise against you to invalidate your patent after it is granted. Have claims of different classes, different types of method claims. You can have the breadth of a claim could be associated with the language you use, and the process patents or method patents allow you to have claims without structural limitations, because the elements are not the parts. So the elements are the steps, so you are not bound by structural limitations. You could also protect in certain cases, you could also protect replacement parts of your invention, though they may not be patentable, by covering a method of replacement. There are some issues with a form of claim which covers a method of replacing, say a method of replacing an ink cartridge. Now, this has been disputed in some jurisdiction, which essentially allows the user to replace the ink cartridge, but without getting into the merits of such claiming. But this is a practice that has been done to protect the replacement of a part which is not patentable by means of a method claim. Covering the performance achieved by the invention. What is the output? What is the performance? You could also cover that. Now, there is an easy way to convert a process claim into an apparatus claim. So if you draft the process claim first, to convert it into an apparatus claim, it's quite easy to convert a process claim into an apparatus claim. Now, you also try to cover, through a process claim, you can also try to cover the manufacturers of the gadgets that are required to come up with the invention. Sometimes the invention may not be manufactured by the person who's putting it out in the market. It could be manufactured by a different person. So by covering the process, you could also have some influence in covering the aspects of infringement where a manufacturer contributes to the infringement. Now, you can take a process claim and add means for language to make it into an apparatus claim. So the process claim can now be made into a product claim just by adding the means for language. We'll look at an example. Now, let's look at this example. There's a process claim, and let's see how it can be converted into an apparatus claim. A method for manufacturing pen comprising, this is the process claim, becomes a machine for manufacturing pen comprising, holding a lower casing in a selected position becomes means for holding a lower casing in a selected position. Inserting a refill into the lower casing becomes means for inserting a refill in a lower casing. Placing an upper casing over the lower casing becomes means for placing an upper casing. And sealing the upper casing and the lower casing with the refill inside becomes means for sealing. So you can see the transition. The holding, an ing form word, can be converted into a means for holding, which means it's a functional language which allows you to have a apparatus claim flowing out of a process claim. This is a quick way to convert, to draft, to begin with a process claim and to convert it into an apparatus claim. Add limitations to the claim language without narrowing by reciting the purpose. Now you can add a limitation without narrowing the scope of the claim by reciting the purpose. We had seen this in the Bajaj patent. Bajaj patent recites efficient burning of air fuel mixture, which is essentially a limitation, but it does not narrow the claim because that is what all internal combustion engines do. You can also claim the environment. Environment in the sense that we had seen in the Bajaj case, there was an arrangement of the invention pertained to spark plug arrangement. So rather than claiming a spark plug for an engine, which is the way they could have claimed it, they had claimed an engine that includes a patentable spark plug or a patentable arrangement for a spark plug. So what was claimed was an engine with the patentable arrangement as a part of it. So this is a way to claim the environment. Environment in this case being the engine. You should have some ratio between the independent and the dependent claims. Now we say this because the more the number of dependent claims tied to one independent claim, it could make your invention look complex, and the examiner or the controller who's going to look at your claim will spend more time on it, and he may feel that there are reasons he may feel that your invention has not come out clearly. The fact that you had to use so many dependent claims. Now, some people say that the ratio between the independent and the dependent claim has to be 1:5. Now, that's left to personal choice, but understand that for claims beyond 10, you will be charged separately, so you need to bear that in mind. Now, dependent claims can define the scope of the independent claim. So we saw in the claim arrangement chart definition of element X. So you saw that there was a broad claim, and the first dependent claim would explain an element or define an element. So you could use dependent claims to define the scope of independent claim. They can be used to show the order of steps is not relevant. For instance, you have A plus B plus C to achieve a particular result. That can be dependent claim 2. Now, dependent claim 3 can be A plus C plus B in a different sequence to achieve the same result. So what you do here is to convey through two dependent claims that the order in which you have done things is not relevant. It could also be done through an alternative order. So that's one way you try to tell the world that you cannot do it in another way because I've already covered that way as well. To protect matter when the parent is not patentable. Now you could use dependent claims, which we had already mentioned in the context of refilling ink cartridges. You could, though there are some controversies as to whether such a claim can be allowed, without getting into the subject matter of the merit of it, you could use a way of doing a particular thing when the thing itself cannot be patented. You could clarify indefinite claim language through the dependent claims. So the dependent claims can clarify, bring in more detail to the claim language, where the independent claim is broad and is not very definite. Now, for instance, if the independent claim narrates or recites an effective amount of X, now there could be some issue with regard to what the effective amount is. In a dependent claim, you can say wherein the effective amount is 1 to 5 grams of X. You could explain that. Now, you could use dependent claims to show additions and alternatives to the main invention. You should focus on the commercial embodiment the dependent claim can be used to claim what is actually sold in the market embodiment. Because in an infringement suit, if a competitor raises an objection challenging your patent or seeking for a revocation of your patent, that's a defense which any infringer can take. Or the infringer looks at your patent application and files for an opposition against your patent application. Then a ground that the infringer would raise is to say that your claims are too broad and it does not match the commercial embodiment. This is one way they can either challenge the claim or they can say they are not infringing. So what you could do is to claim the commercial embodiment, the thing that you are selling, by means of a dependent claim. So you could have a broad claim, as we have already discussed. The broad independent claims could be at the level of a concept, but the dependent claim, you could have few claims covering your market embodiment. This is important when you already have a product in the market which is being sold and your application is still pending in the patent office. So when your patent gets granted, you have an independent claim which covers the broad invention at the level of a concept. You also have dependent claims which actually covers what you are selling in the market. So dependent claims can be used to cover what is sold. Foreign filings. Foreign filings can also be important in the sense that in some countries they restrict the filing of independent claims to one. You can only file one independent claim. There are some countries which have that restriction. So in such countries, you would have multiple dependent claims to cover the broader scope, and you would do that by having dependent claims. And dependent claims are also important in prosecution because if you have features of the invention covered through dependent claims of varying scope, some are broad, some are narrow, then during prosecution, if there are objections, you can give up some and retain the others. Now, if your invention has embodiments, say it has 10 embodiments, you have to cover all the 10 embodiments in your claim, and dependent claims are a great way to do that. You could also have kit claims apart from apparatus claims and method claims, and the kit claims are used where products can be combined to achieve a particular result. An off-cited example is pregnancy detection kits because they have multiple things which have to work together to get the desired result. Now, kit claims, for instance, a kit for detecting blood sugar level comprising the patch of claim 1 and the measurement device of claim 20. Now, this is a claim for detecting sugar level where there is a patch already claimed in claim 1 and a measurement device which is already claimed in claim 20. So it's a combination of a patch and a measurement device which makes it a kit. Now you could also have a method claim on how the kit works or how the test is conducted. Now if it's a diagnostic kit, then there is some argument that it will not come under a method of treatment because it is a diagnostic kit. Now, number of claims and ranges. How do you claim numerical ranges? Now you could have multiple dependent claims, but anything beyond 10 claims, you will be charged separately for that. And the patent office normally charges its fee based on the time it spends. So if it has to read more than 30 pages, you are charged for that. If it has to analyze more than 10 claims, then again you are charged extra for that. Now, for numerical ranges, it is advisable to use about because in some cases, you're not exactly sure about what is the precise numerical or number at which a particular thing happens. For instance, temperature of about 100 degrees centigrade to about 120 degrees centigrade because the reaction may happen before 100 or even before 120 or soon after 100. So if you're not sure about where the reaction is happening, then you could use an approximation. Now, try to avoid strict numerical boundary because if you use a very strict numerical boundary, then you are claiming only that. If you say that 7 for some number or some for a range which could be between 5 and 10, if you're precisely claiming 7, then your limit is that number. So you can only use that numerical boundary. You cannot claim anything below 7 or above 7. So it is preferable to avoid strict numerical boundary. You should also avoid precise numbers in numerical limitation. For instance, if temperature is defined using a decimal, as is in this case from 100.00 to 120.00, there'll be some significance attributed to what follows the decimal. Rather, it's better to claim it this way, 100 degree to 120 degree. Now you could use functional language which describes the function heating the elements sufficiently long, and you can describe what sufficiently long is in dependent claims. The sufficiently long can be a range of a temperature. So the functional language allows you to capture a broader part of your invention.